Hey Sunspace Sun, I'm Daisy Victoria. I recently totally redrafted my pattern for my favorite medieval dress. If you haven't watched that video, go check it out. So today I am going to be fitting a mock-up so I can make adjustments to my pattern and make it be exactly the way I want it for my next era of dresses. Now, when you're fitting a mock-up, I suggest you work with a cheap fabric. Muslin is really the go-to. I also really like to make mock-ups out of thrifted bed sheets, anything that's got kind of a nice cottony hand to it that's not stretchy and, is sturdy enough to do a bit of a fitting. Now, I'm making my mock-up out of velvet, cotton velvet. It's a really nice velvet to work with. It's kind of like the thinner of the upholstery type materials. I could use muslin, but I just like to be a rebel and live on the edge. And also I am confident enough in my pattern that I believe that with a few modifications, I can in fact have the type of dress here that is gonna fit well enough that I'm gonna be happy with it. So I don't think that my pattern is going to need huge adjustments. I think that I will have a wearable dress. So this is going to be something we also might call a wearable mock-up. Now, I have not sewn the sleeves on yet. And as I said in the last video, when I tried to redraft my sleeve pattern, I basically got the same one I had before. So I'm pretty confident in the sleeve pattern, but we will eventually sew it onto the dress. If you are not doing buttons on the sleeves, you could honestly go ahead and sew them on, like sew the seam together, put it on, very easy to fit. I am going to go ahead and wait because I'm going to do the whole button thing and make this into a wearable dress. But just a little note there. Now, for the dress itself, I have sewn all of the pieces together. I have not finished off the front, like the front is not sewn together. So what I've got here is the two front pieces, and then there are gores set in between the front and the back pieces. So those are those triangles. And we didn't go over drafting gores, but I do have how to cut the gores out of fabric in the tutorial. It's pretty freaking simple. They're just triangles, and I have a super quick way to get them all cut quickly and easily. I did not use that method this time because I used two different fabrics. This is what's known as a party colored or mi-party coat hardy. So I just winged it by cutting triangles, the length that I thought I needed. So because I did that, I cut the back piece as two skinnier triangles and put them together. So what we're gonna do is put this dress on and see how it looks. Now, also of note is that I'm wearing the same sports bra that I drafted the pattern with, and that's important because that's the fit I'm checking it against. That's the fit I'm going for. So now what you'll want to do is maybe pin the front while you take a look at the fit. I can already see a couple of things that are going to need little tweaking, and I can honestly tell you a couple of things before I pin it, but in order to make this more followable, we're gonna go ahead and pin it. Okay, so right here, you can probably tell right away, the gores are way too high. Now, it's okay to put the gores really high. There are some styles that seem to flare higher up, some of the Italian styles during certain periods, for example. So it's really up to you, but what I'm going for is not that look. What I'm going for is fitted a little further down. So I want to rip out these gores and I want to set them right about here. So obviously I cut my gores too long and I will be resetting them. Now, what I'm looking for is how fitted will the dress be when I move the gores. It's still not going to be super duper tight, and I think that's because I was a little small on my seam allowance when I sewed this together, which is totally fine, and it doesn't have to be as super fitted as all of my dresses are. That's okay. The neckline here is like a little bit buckly, which means I could maybe end up taking it in just a smidge there to make that smoother. I want to emphasize while I'm showing you guys this that your corrections to a mock-up may be any number of things. So some of the main things to look for in this pattern is the fit in the bust, as well as the fit in the waist and hip, the gore placement. So you may end up with them too high, which you can see here. You may also end up with them too low, which is going to give you a little bit of a funny, like wiggly look at the hip. So you want the gore to be somewhere between waist and hip. I mean, you can put it higher than waist, but typically waist to hip is like somewhere in there is ideal. And that goes for the back gore as well. So those are pretty much the main things. Now, if it's too small, that is a place where it's great if you made your mock-up out of cheap fabric. I'm pretty confident that this was not going to be too small, so I'm okay on the cotton velvet. You can always take stuff in a little bit, and if my neckline and everything was totally off, that could have been a problem. That could have been another reason to use muslin, so it's just a cheaper waist. But I'm pretty confident, like I said, this is a little wiggly over here from when I moved the shoulders out, but we can address that. The next thing I'm going to do, though, is actually take out the gores and reset them. And then we will see what everything looks like. I also have already serged all of my fabric. So I went ahead and serged the edge of each piece before I sewed them together. Sometimes I sew them and then serge them, but because I'm going to be probably ripping seams out and redoing them, I did it this way, so that way my fabric doesn't fray or anything, and I have free range to sew, rip out, re-sew, and we're good to go. Okay, so here's the dress with that changed. So I've moved all the gores down to where I think they should be placed. Let's try it on and see how it looks. I am much more pleased with this fit. So now it is fitted throughout the body, the torso. And what I'm also noticing is in this new pattern, I like how the back is a little bit straighter than it was in my last pattern. So it still goes with the curve of my back, but it's encouraging me not to hunch forward. It's encouraging my shoulders to stay more where they need to be. And I could probably take it in very slightly on that back curve and still be okay, which means I could have a very straight back seam indeed, but it at least looks very good right now. Because I'm going to put buttons in the front here, I'm going to try to kind of simulate a button overlap. I think that that's honestly like pretty good in the waist. So it's not super duper tight, like that's all right. I don't need it to be super duper tight. I have dresses already that are super duper tight if I want to wear one. Part of me does kind of want to take in this back a little bit, but I can do that anytime. So because of the way I serged the fabric and kind of set this up to be easy to adjust, I can actually complete the dress, and then if I still feel like I want to take the back in, I can do that. And now I do want to note too that any adjustments I make to this, I need to transfer those adjustments to my pattern, because the whole point of this is not just to make a dress, it's to make a pattern that I'm going to use for all my future dresses of this style. So very important. For me, the next thing that I will do is actually put on the sleeves. So you'll see how the fitting of that goes. All right, we're back here for a moment of intervention in setting the sleeves. So I sewed my sleeves together, leaving some open at the end where I'm going to put buttons up to the elbow. And now I am setting my sleeves into the arm size, and I have an interesting problem. So my arm size, I don't know how well you can see, they're slightly larger than my sleeve. So if your sleeve is larger than your arm size by just a little bit, it's fine because you can ease it in. If it's way too large, you might want to take some fabric out of your sleeve, which is not that hard to do. This is a more interesting problem because I'm going to need to either increase my sleeve, which I can't do without cutting a new one, or decrease my arm size. Now, when I tried this dress on, I did notice that I had a little bit of extra in the sides, and that went all the way up to the arm size. So I am choosing to take in my arm size. So I am simply going to figure out where that is, pin that, and take my dress in by that much. Now, I will be doing this on both sides, so that way both sleeves will fit. Okay, sleeves are on. We are going to fit this again, try it on, and take a look. And because I altered part of the side seams to address that arm size issue, I do need to fit the bodice and look at how that changed that as well. Okay, so now it's much tighter through the bodice, as can be expected from doing that little change, and I think that's actually what I want. My arm size are a little bit on the small side, so I mean, it's okay, you know, I can like move my arms and stuff, but I think that I would prefer to cut them a little bit bigger and then make my sleeve, like the top of my sleeve, a little bit bigger too. So that's an alteration I think I'll do on my pattern. And again, this is a great example of what I was telling you. Like, I am confident that even if this dress is not perfect, it's going to be wearable. And I'm okay with the sleeve caps not being perfect. I'll still be able to wear the dress. It's just something that I might want to address for future dresses. Yeah, so I'm not sure that I necessarily like how the neckline changed when I did that little trick where I moved the arms over to account for that little dart placement that would have otherwise been needed. Part of that may be that, you know, it's not going to fit exactly the same as the sports bra, so perhaps when I don't have the sports bra in, my bust will just kind of fill it in. Overall, I'm pretty pleased with it. So yeah, I would just widen the arm size and sleeves for the next one, but other than that, I really think the fit of this is very good. So when doing your mock-up, you don't really have to finish off the whole dress. You may want to go ahead and finish this part off, you know, do the sleeves to the bottom just to check how comfy everything is. But I'm going to go ahead and fully finish the dress because it's going to be a wearable dress, wearable mock-up, wearable dress. And also when you do your mock-up, you don't have to make the dress full length. Like, you could just go to the hips and you could just mark where you want your gores to be. Like, you don't even have to put them in. I put them in from the start because, once again, making a full dress, gonna have gores in there. So what I have left to do here is trim. At the bottom, I have a lot of extra fabric in the gores because I cut them too long. So I'm gonna have to trim that, drape the dress so that I have the hem cut to the right length all around. I need to finish off the edges, add buttons, and I'm going to add some decorative trim, which I am creating using finger loop braid. And once I have all of that done, I will have a fancy new velvet dress made using a brand new pattern. Okay, so hello Butterscotch. She's trying to tell me it's almost dinner time. She's a little early. So because I like to try to get things as perfect as I can, remember I said I can wear the dress with the sleeves a little tight like that, but I decided that I'd rather fit a new sleeve because I would like to go ahead and test that and make sure that this dress is really the pattern that I'm looking for. So maybe I can use it on some pricey fabric and feel good about it. So I cut a new sleeve pattern. So this sleeve pattern versus the old one. Okay, so what I've done is I've raised this sleeve cap by about 3 inches. I use my finger to measure 3 inches approximately. And then I, of course, raised up here where it's going to meet. So I think that's going to take out some of that little bunching that was in the bicep and make it fit a lot better and give me a little more like range of motion. And when I drafted this up, I made sure that this matches here, right? And this matches here. So that way when I sew it together, the sleeve will kind of match up along the top. So what I'm gonna do is just put these new sleeves on exactly how I had the last sleeves. I happen to have enough fabric that I can do that. And because I hate wasting, I could put these sleeves on another dress. What I could also do is I can cut off the top and then I can basically make a pair of pin-on sleeves out of these that I could then wear with any other dress that can take pin-on sleeves. Yes, kitten, it's not time yet. I know. You want to help? So that way I'll have new sleeves to go with whatever else I want to wear them with. Although kitten is a little early for dinner time, it is getting late in the day and I usually stop sewing / working around now. I think what I'm gonna do is sew the new sleeves on and then I will come back to you tomorrow for the rest. Okay, so I put in those new sleeves and what we can see here is it's almost like looking gathered a little bit in some places. So if you ease sleeves in and they're a little too big still, you will get a little bit of gathers. Usually easing doesn't give you that much, but I think, you know, my sleeves were on the big side for the arm size. I'm not really upset about that. I think it's gonna be okay. Let's try it on and see. Oh yeah, this is much more comfortable. Okay, so already I can tell these sleeves are way more comfortable than they were before. Now, as you can see, there's a bit more gathering around the back side of the sleeve, just the way I place them. So what I can do in my pattern is I can adjust for that a little bit, like take out some of the width there. But for now, I think this is totally fine for this particular dress. Not that worried about it. I'm happy that I changed the sleeves because they are a lot more comfortable. Like I would have made it with the tight sleeves, but these are better. All right, so let's finish up this dress. Now I really wanted to focus this video on the fitting of the mock-up. However, it would be so incomplete to not actually finish the dress with you. So I have been working on a couple of things along the neckline and also along the edges of the sleeves. I have added a silk binding. Now this is not cut on the bias, this is cut on the straight grain. The reason for that is that in period, the bindings that we tend to have in extant archaeological garments tend to be cut on the straight grain. So I'm doing that as a historic thing, and also it's more fabric efficient because I was just using a couple strips of the silk, so bonus. Oh, so I went ahead and sewed the front together up to the hips, and from neckline to hip it is going to button. The sleeves are also going to button from about elbow to wrist, and I've gone ahead and sewn on the buttons. Now the buttons are sewn on about 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters apart. I have 10 per sleeve and I have 14 on the front edge. So the reason I've done this first is because I am trying something I have never done before with buttons. I like to try something a little different sometimes when I can, just to keep things interesting. So I have been finger loop braiding. Now this is a different finger loop braid pattern than the ones I've done before, so I'm thinking I will show you guys in another video how to do that. But for now, I've got a bunch of these cords I've made. I was originally going to use them just to decorate here along with that edging. I think that will be so cool. And then what I decided too is that I'm actually going to use them to create the button loops. So that's something new I haven't done before, and I am going to figure it out. Okay, so what I am going to do is I'm going to attach this cord, and normally it would go very straight along the edge. I suspect I'm going to need to give it a little bit of ease to go around those buttons. It does have some stretch to it, but not a lot. It's pretty well woven, but you know, it'll stretch slightly, which will help it to go around those buttons. All right, so the dress is done, and I also turned the extra sleeves into separate pin-on sleeves. So instead of cutting these off, I went ahead and did it the entire sleeve, so that way I can pin it onto like a sleeveless 16th century gown, because I do like to wear those. Normally the sleeves match on those, but now I will have two different sleeves, very stylish. So that's put aside for other dresses. Let's take a look at what we really are looking at. Now the edging is my finger loop cord, which I have stitched on, and here I've left openings for the buttons. So each button will just slide right in there. My first time doing it that way, I'm really excited because, I mean, the actual sewing of the dress is something I've done like a ton of times, but it's fun to do something that's like a little bit different, just a little bit of whimsy in there. So I'm going to put this on and we're going to evaluate the fit. A bit of advice if you're doing the buttons this way, because at first I just stitched a very little bit in between the buttons and they were wanting to come undone when I buttoned them. So I stitched a little bit more, so basically the opening the button goes through is just big enough to fit the button and no extra. So if you have extra space, then if it's under tension, it'll want to come unbuttoned. Now the sleeves are not under a lot of tension, so I did not go back over the sleeves. They seem to be fine without having super close stitching to the buttons. Like with having slightly larger openings, basically, they're okay. It's just where you're under tension that can be an issue. I have my regular bra on right now, and it's a good test to see if I can wear that with this dress. Obviously I will want to put it on without my regular bra, and I think I will do that for the photo shoot, which I will insert into the end of this video. But I'm gonna do that another day because today it is extremely rainy and not the best day for a photo shoot. So first of all, I love it. I am impressed with myself that this is my first draft. I'm gonna be honest, like I've drafted this pattern from scratch multiple times before. I've worked with it a bunch, I've adjusted it a bunch. Like, it's not like this is my first time. So if it takes you a couple drafts to get here, please know that it took me even more to get to this level. So you're not alone. Now, a couple things. So I had taken in the back a bit so that my shoulders have to be straight and not like pulled forward. And as it stands, like it actually is not comfortable to pull them forward because it pulls on the dress. So it really, really encourages me to have better posture. And that's one thing I really wanted to change about my pattern in general. Another thing is that I think my arm size are slightly like further in on my shoulders than they used to be in my old one, which is more comfortable. It gives me a better range of movement. So one thing that's a note if you're working on a pattern is that the further out on your shoulders your arm seams are, the less range of movement you're going to have. So the more in you put them all the way around, the more range of motion you can build into your sleeves, right? Because your dress isn't, the bodice of your dress is not going to get in the way of that movement. I am pleased with this second draft of the sleeves. The only thing that I might nitpick myself on, which is totally a nitpick, and I just want to show you guys like all the ways that you can adjust things. I would say these buttons are a little bit low. Like I would prefer them to be maybe right here. I can easily adjust that. So basically where the seam is, I can take some of the lower part of the sleeve and transfer it to the upper part, right? So just move where that seam is. Again, that's a nitpick. I mean, this dress is totally great as is, like really not a big deal, but if, so the fabric I have that I want to make a different dress out of is like 90 bucks a meter. And so you might see why I want to get the pattern perfect before I work with that. So this one's fine, but I could make a little tweak. Now, as far as the bodice goes, it's pretty well fitted, honestly. I like how it fits. It feels comfortable. It feels like it's going to be supportive. One thing about that is, like, under the bust, it's pretty tight. So my bust is going to stay where it fits in the dress, right? So that's how you get it supportive, just like a bra. So overall, really like it. I like the fabric selection as well. So this was actually just the flat fold, like bargain fabrics from Joann's. And it's a little bit thick for like regular clothes, but it's okay for this dress. It is cotton velvet, and it is plain green on one side and super cool pattern on the other. The buttons are these laurel buttons that are kind of a bronzy look. This is a silk facing, and like I said, this is cut on the straight grain, as that is more what we see in archaeological evidence. And this is a finger loop cord, which I created all around the edges, and that's really it. So let's do a photo shoot. I always have so much fun with these dress styles. So here's a couple of final notes on this draft. Butterscotch is meowing because she thinks it's dinner time, but she is wrong. It is not dinner time yet. So the fit of this dress is pretty good. I would say if I'm gonna nitpick myself, I could improve it just slightly, but that said, it's totally comfortable and wearable. So tweak number one is very, very simple. I think that I want to move the buttons maybe like ½ inch or so up, which means that I'm going to move the seam on the sleeve to just a little bit higher up toward the shoulder. And I can do that by cutting that part off the pattern and then sticking it onto the other side of the pattern. So basically I would take my pattern here, and if I want the seam to be up here, I would simply snip that off and then add it on to the other side. Other things, once the fabric kind of stretched to my body, it's not quite as tight throughout the torso as it was when I first put it on. So I can take in just a little bit there. Again, it's not very much, it's just a little tweak. The other thing is, so before when I made these dresses, I used to not account for that bust dart thing I showed you. I used to just kind of deal with, you know, having a little extra in the armhole and having the neckline be where it was. So this time, since I did that and I moved this over, I have a lot more fabric in the neckline, or more, you know, length of the neckline than what I had before. And because I didn't take it all in here at the front, it's a little, just a tad bit big on what I would like it to be. And I can address that in two ways. One way would be to take some off of the front there. That would pull that neckline in, and it would also take in the bust just slightly. The other thing I could do is I could basically uncompensate a little bit. So like I could dart this very slightly back over, so that way it's not quite as far over, right? So maybe if I didn't take it as far over, then I wouldn't have, you know, as much neckline. So that's another way that I could do that. So those are just suggestions for my future self, things I'm going to play with on my next mock-up. So this is mock-up number 1. The next one will be mock-up number 2. I am not afraid to do my mock-ups out of my real fabric. Now I hope that you are getting some insight from my trials and tribulations, and if you are, I would love to see what you make, whether you're just going off videos for a couple tips, whether you're using my PDF tutorial, or whether you're making something totally different and you just like to hang out with me. You can find me on all the social medias as Daisy Viktoria. My website is daisyviktoria.com, and a special thank you to my patrons over on Patreon who help me to continue creating content just like this. I hope you all have an absolutely magical day, perhaps even a day fit for a medieval forest elf. All right, I'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye.